Welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction podcast. I'm Chase.
And I'm Adam. On this episode, we are talking about unidentified flying objects, UFOs, specifically UFO sightings and encounters.
Ooh. Out of the 20 topics that we have talked about, I think UFOs will be on my list on the top of my top 20, top 21 of topics.
We've been exchanging text messages this week about this topic, and I don't think I've ever seen so many messages from you and producer Allison.
Yeah, I'm fired up, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think at one point on my phone I had like 60 messages from you guys. 60 unread messages.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things that I'm glad we're talking about. And I think this is a very timely conversation as well with all of the UFO news that has come out recently. So I think we're spot on with this one from an excitement standpoint and from a timeliness standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a fair amount of UFO news, but it's not just a recent thing, right? So, I mean, UFOs have been in the proverbial news for quite a while. The first sighting that we had record of came across in America was in 1639.
Wait, how was that in America?
1639?
Yeah. Was it fucking Jamestown?
Mm-hmm.
Or the Indians? Did the Indians report on it?
John Winthrop.
Oh, John Winthrop. Oh, I know John. Isn't he the guy from Pocahontas?
No.
John something.
They were all named John, but that was the wrong John.
I think that's
Like
a pretty
John
common.
Smith.
yeah.
This guy was the governor of Massachusetts.
Ah, interesting. And he reported on a UFO?
He did, John Winthrop. He wrote about a strange sighting in his journal, diary, whatever you want to call it.
Everybody's got these fucking journals, man.
Do you want me to read a little from his journal?
Yes, please.
When it stood still, it flamed up and was about 3 yards square. When it ran, it was contracted into the figure of a swine.
What? Dude was so fucking high.
So then, over the course of a couple hours, John and a couple other guys said that this mysterious light ran as swift as an arrow, and it darted back and forth between them and the village of Charlestown, which was about 2 miles away. The governor wrote later that the strange apparition finally faded away, and all the guys in the boat were just stunned to find themselves 1 mile upstream. So they completely lost time and showed up in a different area.
Interesting. That's wild.
This was what John wrote in his diary, the first recorded sighting in America.
That's interesting.
I'm surprised they didn't think it was some sort of religious god thing, because I don't think aliens were on anyone's radar.
Well, they didn't. I mean, it doesn't say that what they thought it was, though,
Yeah.
right?
No.
I mean, I think if you look back even further in history, as you look at not necessarily the ones in America, going back before 1639, before 1400s, 1300s, and then previously back then, I think you see a lot of these things that are written about in all these fucking journals that everybody has, or manuscripts or whatever the hell they're writing, and saying oh, there was a godly thing that came down from the heavens. Or I think there is a certain part of UFO history that sort of reverts back to religious beliefs.
So you don't think Jesus flies in a spaceship?
Look, I mean, maybe. I've never seen Jesus fly in a spaceship before. I mean, I know you're joking there, but I think that was probably half of what was intended to be seen through people's eyes was hey, this shit is coming down. This must be Jesus coming down from the heavens, or God coming down from the heavens. Yeah,
and I think that's kind of a theme that I think for me that I would probably talk a lot about tonight, which is even this example. I mean, we don't know exactly what this was, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's pretty vague, but there's lots of things that it probably could have been. Certain cultures and periods over time, we don't understand everything about the universe. And so it's really easy to see something and try to make an explanation for it when it may just be something completely logical that we just don't understand yet.
Yeah. Well, I think, not to go off course here, but I think that's religion as a whole, right? That's what miracles are and that sort of stuff too. So
sure.
It makes sense that, you would think of something that you didn't understand, especially back in the day, tie it back to a religious nexus, because of that's basically all you know, and everything that you attribute that you don't know, pretty much goes back to religion at that point in time anyways. So And you see in all these drawings and hieroglyphics and paintings and all this stuff too, how like these things that are in the heavens, assuming that we're talking about UFOs in these pictures and stuff as well, they're portrayed as like, you know, they're bright, they're shiny, they're in the heavens, they're in the sky, that sort of stuff. So they're very much perceived throughout history, I think, as being this godly, heavenly thing.
So 1639, John Winthrop writes in his journal about this first sighting in the Americas. What's the most significant thing that kind of happens after that, in your opinion, since you're kind of like an expert in this field?
After 1639?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the trickiness between, like, let's just assume we're talking about that beginning, 1639, all the way up to the first time that you can really talk about UFOs in the mainstream is in the 1940s.
Okay.
Now, I think before that, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of people recollecting what they've seen, similar to whatever the fuck John's name is that you just mentioned.
Winthrop.
John Winthrop. Not discounting what he saw, and then all the folks, you know, in the 1700s and 1800s. But it's pretty much just a first-hand encounter. It's somebody writing something down, not, you know, really stating what the situation was. Were they drunk? Were they sober? Were they high? Were they with other folks? Were they, you know, and John Winthrop does say, you know, other people saw this as well. But I think up until the 1940s, you really start to see the hysteria of UFOs and extraterrestrials as a whole come together and come into the mainstream. So that's sort of where I start, like the true, like, looking back in history at UFOs, I think is like the mid 40s.
Okay. So
right around the end of World War II.
That's interesting that you say this kind of picked up a lot in the 1940s, World War II, where, you know, some of the military technology was starting to really advance. But what kind of events are you referring to in the 1940s that were significant?
Well, so I think, I mean, there's lists from the 40s and the 50s specifically. And again, we've talked about like sort of this groupthink mentality, or the way that the human brain works with ghosts. I think we talked about it, where one person sees a ghost, and then every time somebody walks into that house, they're like, oh, I see that ghost too. So I think in the 1940s and 50s, you start to see this hysteria that oh, I see a ghost too type thing, where one person in the United States, or a story goes mainstream, they start to see this, you know, this UFO, that story goes mainstream, and then everybody reads about it, and then everything that happens in the night sky or in the daytime that doesn't make sense becomes a UFO. So you see that hysteria happening. But I think one of the biggest sort of checkboxes that you can see in the 1940s of this hysteria, and actually of all of these things actually being corroborated and actually being events and being able to be backed up by evidence, or, you know, photographs, or, you know, numerous people telling the same story, is the government actually starts to pick up on this stuff, right? And
of course,
1947 is when the government actually starts to say, hey, these things are real. And they set up basically the predecessor to what is probably more commonly known as Project Blue Book. But there was two predecessors before Project Blue Book. The first one in 1947 was set up as Project Sign.
Sign?
Sign, S-I-G-N, yes.
Sign. S-I-N-E, like the math sign.
Yes, like the calculus. I think that's calculus, whatever. I can't do calculus.
It is calculus.
So you see Project SIGN get set up in 1947, and it's set up by the Air Force. And that's, to me, that is the government saying, hey, there's something to this stuff that we need to investigate it. We need to dedicate resources. We need to take some sort of scientific approach.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the case. That could have just been the government saying, hey, there could be weird shit. People could be spying on us. They could be sending this weird technology, trying to infiltrate us, trying to harm us. We need to figure this out. I don't think that the first thing that you think is, oh shit, maybe there's aliens trying to get us.
Okay, so let's level this episode out in the first place, right? Like within the first 5 minutes of this, let's level out. I am not necessarily equating all UFO encounters to extraterrestrials or to aliens. I don't think that's a one-for-one pairing of there's a UFO, there's an alien. Okay? So let's just level that out. So
yeah, because Jesus flies
Yeah,
spaceships.
Jesus. I mean, we've made that pretty clear that there can be Jesus UFOs.
And Jesus is not an alien.
Jesus is just all right with me. But I don't equate all necessarily UFO encounters, as you said, military technology, and especially as you're looking towards the future and in sort of current state UFO, research and investigations, that sort of stuff. I think you have to be cognizant that just because we don't know what it is and can't identify it doesn't necessarily mean that it's aliens.
Okay. That's a very grounded perspective.
Yes, but but I also don't think that you can completely discount the extraterrestrial origin of these things either.
Well, that's like trying to prove a negative. You can't always do that. So, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's not digress because we'll probably talk about that a little bit later too. But
I'm sure. Project Blue Book.
So 1947, and we're not even to Project Blue Book yet. In 1947, Project Sign gets set up. And probably before we talk about Project Sign, we have to talk about what is probably one of the biggest pop culture UFO references of the 40s and 50s. Do you want to take a guess as to what that was? And it's before Project Sign gets set up. So pre-1947.
That would have to be the glorious town of Roswell, New Mexico.
No, you are wrong. That happened in 1947.
Okay, that was a trick question.
In tandem of Project Sign getting set up, you have Roswell, basically. The hysteria kicks off in, like we said, in the 40s and the 50s. But what starts the hysteria is a thing called the Battle of Los Angeles. Are you familiar with this? Not the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like a movie.
The modern day movie is based off of the Battle of Los Angeles from 1942.
So it's like War of the Worlds.
It's exactly like War of the Worlds. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures, Adam, but you can probably Google it real quick and look at the pictures as we're talking. But this is literally like everything that you envision War of the Worlds to be, the Battle of Los Angeles became.
I'm confused. Are you saying that aliens invaded and they destroyed Los Angeles?
What I'm about to say to you is a theory of mine. World War II was actually fought with aliens. Would you believe me if I told you that?
No.
No, I'm just kidding.
I would not believe you at all.
That's not that's not where we're going with this. So in 1942, we're like balls deep in World War II, right? Like especially the West Coast where Japan had hit Pearl Harbor. We're fucking locked and loaded as a country in 1942. We're ready to beat the fucking punk ass out of anybody that comes close to us. So in one morning in 1942, February 24th, to be exact. And I don't want to read this whole fucking thing because, quite frankly, the movie is a great representation of what actually happened on that day. So you can just go and watch the movie. No, I'm just kidding. But go and read it. But I'll paraphrase this a little bit. Basically, we're at heightened sense. Our fucking spidey senses are going off. We're ready to move. We're ready to pound. We're ready to shoot. All this stuff. And something happens over Los Angeles one night. And you can look at these pictures because it looks very cinematic. Basically, the sirens sound, the guns blaze, all the guns are shooting at this random thing in the middle of the sky. Nobody knows what it is. The prior days before that, the Navy had basically gotten a tip that says, hey, something's going to happen. So everybody's already on edge. Everybody's blasting up into the air. It literally looks like War of the Worlds. Something is happening. You're seeing missile launcher guns and all that stuff, the giant caliber guns, and kills 5 people basically from traffic accidents from all of this happening. When all is said and done, they attribute it to a weather balloon.
So they blew the shit out of a weather balloon.
That's basically what happened. But the preface to all, what everybody's mind was like, oh, there's something coming out of the water. It's a Japanese submarine, because the Japanese at that point had made a lot of reference to like the new war territory is the ocean. Like anything is possible in the ocean. And basically what happens was something flies up, and I don't actually know if it was a weather balloon or what it was, but it ends up to be a false alarm.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And the pictures that I'm sure everybody will look up as they're driving, listening to this, that picture is not a true picture. That's an artist rendering, basically. But that's what takes off. You see that in every newspaper. You see the searchlights. You see the bullets. You see the all these fabricated stories happening, and it ends up to be just this.
That sounds like a terrible movie, by the way.
Yeah, it is a terrible movie.
We shot at a weather balloon.
But this raised all the alarms, right? Like this was the mass hysteria of World War II. And it sort of builds up to say the government now needs to start looking at this stuff. Now, again, I don't think the government is claiming extraterrestrial. I don't think they're claiming that these things are otherworldly. But there is a sense that military technology is changing. They're just at the butthole end of World War II. They're entering the Cold War at this point, right? God, I sound so fucking smart. Who'd have thunk that UFOs and aliens would be the things that commit fucking history lessons to my brain?
Do you frame all of your history and how it fits in UFO?
The timeline of UFO
history?
lore. Yes.
Oh, 1942. That was Franklin Roosevelt.
So now we're fucking nuts deep into UFO reporting, UFO folklore. Aliens exist. They're going to come and take us away and invade our world and all that stuff.
So what does this have to do with Blue Book?
In 47, there's probably 3 things that basically really start to, kick up the validation as to why the government should dedicate funds to these projects. June 24th was Mount Rainier sighting. July 8th was Roswell. And then in 48, you have the Mantell incident. So during this period, 1947, 1948, basically they do a lot of investigations with Project Sign, but it all gets attributed to natural phenomena.
Yeah, logical fucking answer.
Which I think is a fucking cop-out for an investigation, but not my place to say. So Project Sign goes until 1949, and then it basically gets disbanded.
Yeah, because it was a failure.
It wasn't necessarily a failure.
Did it find any UFOs? Like real aliens?
No, but that's, again, if you're attributing UFOs to aliens, then no, it did not find.
Failure.
Did it find any UFOs? I think that's debatable.
You said they had identified them all as natural phenomena.
No, I didn't say they identified them all. But most of the time, when you're looking back at these investigations, it's natural phenomenon that people are blaming for these sightings. But in 1947, again, you don't have drone technology. You don't have...
That we know about.
Well, maybe. But you don't have these things that you could actually attribute to, like, this is actually a flying object, but it's still unidentified, like a drone or something like that. So that gets disbanded, and Project Grudge gets set up for a very short time. And by the name of Project Grudge, you should be able to know, basically there's a lot of fucking people in the Air Force that got pissed off that there were resources dedicated to investigating UFOs, that they were basically, the Air Force was feeding into the hysteria of the 40s, actually supporting these sightings and making these claims a little bit more valid, and actually feeding these crazy people that were seeing these UFOs. They were feeding that hysteria. So a lot of people got pissed off. Half of the reason why Project Sign gets disbanded, Project Grudge gets started, is basically they wanted to instill the faith in the public that says, hey, we still support UFO investigations. We set up Project Grudge, blah, blah, blah. From a publicity standpoint, it looks amazing.
How does it look amazing? Why do the people care?
Because it's hysteria, man. It's like Beatlemania at this point. Like, people are fucking head over heels for UFOs. They're seeing UFOs left and right. Everything that can't be explained is attributed to a UFO. I'm an analyst, as you know, Adam. You can tell by my face how smart I am.
Yeah, and you used to work for the government. You're telling us all the government secrets.
I am. The first thing that you try to do as an analyst is go into something with an open mind, right? Like, you go into a situation with an open mind and you collect the data, you look at the data, and then you make your assumption or your conclusion based off of that.
That's not what you do.
You don't?
That's what you should do, but that's not what you do. What you do is you go in with a theory, and then you find the data that supports your theory, and then you ignore all the data that doesn't.
So that's exactly what happens with Project Grudge. There's a bunch of old dudes that are pissed off that this is actually, taking any sort of credence in the government. And so they basically go into these investigations with deny, this never happened, UFOs are not possible, blah, 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 blah. So it basically fails as a investigatory arm, but it works to sort of calm the public down a little bit from this hysteria. And then it gets disbanded shortly. Come to find out, and to no surprise, Project Grudge gets disbanded because people in government then start to shift after a couple years and say, well, why the fuck are we denying all of this? Your analytical practices are bad. We need to really take a approach to this that is going to enable us to statistically look at this stuff, to scientifically look at this stuff. And so Project Blue Book gets set up under the auspices that we're going to take an analytical approach to this. We're going to sample enough data, talk to enough witnesses to be able to make sound conclusions, but we're going to not really feed the hysteria too much. So you get that code word, Project Blue Book, to make sure that the public doesn't necessarily know that, this is the Men in Black. These guys are going out and investigating these UFO sightings.
Project Men in Black would have been a cooler name.
Project MIB?
Yeah. So I saw that Project Blue Book investigated over 12,000 sightings.
Yes.
And of those sightings, 700 remained unidentified.
Yeah. mean, that's pretty good. I mean, okay, we talk about me not being able to do math. What percentage is that, Adam?
Roughly 6%.
Okay, roughly 6%. To me, that's a pretty fucking good number. You're talking about 700 things that happened that couldn't be explained.
In the 1940s.
In the 1940s, but still.
Well, 1947 to 1969.
Details.
What are you getting at, Adam?
I'm saying that at that point, just like any of these other incidents, like our John Winthrop incident in 1639, just because we couldn't explain it at the time doesn't mean that it was extraterrestrials.
Well, no. Again, nobody through this whole process is saying it's alien. Everybody is just saying there are unidentified flying objects.
If it's not aliens, why do we care about it?
Well, because it's a national security threat. And what you see from a lot of these investigations, especially, going into the 80s and the 90s and up to this point as well, that a lot of these investigations are stalled out because they deem like, oh, we can't explain it, but we haven't seen it since, or it flew away and we don't have to worry about it anymore, so we're not going to investigate it anymore.
Yeah, and we're still alive. Like, it didn't hurt us, so...
You investigate it first and foremost for national security. If you don't know what the fuck is flying in your airspace or under the waters or marching your streets, you go and fucking investigate it. And if you find that it's just a bunch of the preschool kids marching the streets, and you say, okay, guys, I can close this investigation.
That'd be creepy, though.
Well, yeah maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, you definitely have to question as to what the fuck's going on, but
right.
But you can see from the notes from a lot of these investigations that this is not a national security threat. We're not going to dedicate our small amount of resources to moving to this any further. I don't necessarily think they're investigating from the standpoint of this must be aliens coming to invade us. They're thinking from it from a national security perspective and working their way back from there.
Okay, so let's talk about the most famous incident then. Roswell, right?
Yeah.
In 1947, there was a flying disc,
supposedly,
allegedly,
yes,
that crashed in a field. And initial reports from the Roswell Army Airfield said this flying disc had been recovered. And then later that day, the story suspiciously changed to the disc being a weather balloon.
Yeah. And that's the Battle of Los Angeles again. When you change the story and there's no reasoning as to why you change the story, then people start to just go like, what are they hiding? Don't look, what's behind the door?
There's a picture of this alien laying on a medical.
It's an autopsy
bed.
of an alien.
What's the story with that picture? I don't remember.
So there was, and I don't recall the year. You'll have to pardon me that I'm not fucking Rain Man with all of this stuff. But at some point, some guy makes a video, and this is sort of just skipping ahead, but some guy makes a video of the alien autopsy and admits that it was faked. He said it was a fake video, that he fabricated the video, but it was based off of a true story.
So there are eyewitness reports, right, in Roswell of seeing alien bodies, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then those were later said by the military to have been dummies that were dropped from airplanes or whatever for testing purposes. Is that right?
No. Do you want to hear a fucked up story about what that probably was?
Oh, well, that's what I read when I was researching, is that they tried to say it was like dummies that they were dropping for research purposes.
Yeah. So there's a weird, and that is that's the main story. This makes me sound like a fucking maniac that I'm negating
the officials. That's the official story,
yeah.
Right?
That's
okay.
the official. Yeah, that's what you will read if you do read that there were bodies. They were dummies that got dropped. So this is going to make me sound like I'm making this up, and I swear to you, I'm not. I heard this or read this somewhere, but there was supposedly somebody that worked the Roswell case. I don't know if he was a military. I assume that he was part of the Roswell incident in some shape or form. On his deathbed, he told somebody those bodies weren't dummies. They weren't aliens. He said that what Roswell was Joseph Stalin created a sort of weather balloon or something that could fly or float over to the United States as sort of propaganda and to scare us during the Cold War.
So the Russians made a body balloon?
No, listen.
To drop bodies?
What he did, once whatever apparatus crashed, this guy claims that Stalin had basically sort of what the Nazis had done, where they did experiments on retarded kids with Down syndrome and that sort of stuff.
People with disabilities.
Yeah, sorry, whatever.
Politically correct way to say that.
He manipulated their faces, their bodies to make them look like aliens and just to spook the shit out of America because of this hysteria, because Stalin was just so into Stalin basically invented propaganda
I mean, if that's true, that's actually kind of brilliant.
Yeah, it is, right? And so,
but really fucked up.
Yeah,
it's
but
really fucked up. But
fuck with your enemy's head.
Yes, and then you look at these kids that have crashed in this apparatus that you can't even attribute, and then you think like, well, these fuckers look like humans, but they got a third eye or they have one arm. Like, it's a truly sad story if it's true, but it is, like you said, Adam, like it's a genius way, and it does sort of, if you think of Roswell in the totality of it, like everything about that story makes sense. Like there were bodies that were taken away. They did look like aliens. There was something that crashed. Like all this stuff just makes sense. So that's a wild story that I heard, and I'll fact check it at some point. And
as you're saying it, I'm remembering reading something similar. So I don't think that, I mean, I think that you're crazy, but not because of this.
Yeah,
I think I read something like that too. It's coming back to me.
Yeah. It's a weird story.
So is that what you think happened? Do you think that's?
I think something happened in Roswell. But I think, again, there's so much folklore around all of this stuff. Something happened in Roswell, just like something happened with a lot of this stuff. But it doesn't necessarily equal UFOs.
All right, so you've given us a nice history lesson so far, Chase.
Yes.
We talked about Roswell. We talked a lot about Battle of Los Angeles, Project SIGN, whatever. You also mentioned the Mount Rainier.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one?
So this guy's a civilian pilot, Kenneth Arnold. He's flying his tiny little aircraft. And again, this is 1947. So this is the first one. This comes before Roswell, June 24th. And Ken Arnold claims to have seen 9 blue glowing objects flying at 1,700 miles an hour. That's an estimation, of course, because he's not clocking it.
Okay, I was going to say 1947. How does he estimate the speed?
Well, he's a pilot, I think.
Okay.
Going forth from 1947 into the future to current, you'll see a lot of these times these pilots can say like, oh, this is going, this many clicks, just because I think they're comparing it to how fast their plane is going.
That sounds like when you're trying to explain a situation and you just like make up a number, the first number that comes to mind. It was 17,000 miles per hour.
Well, first of all, it's 1,700, so pay attention. Secondly, if I'm going 50 miles an hour in a car and somebody passes me, I can tell how fast they're going. Are they going 75? Are they going 100? Are they going 200? I would be able to tell
No, you
that.
can't.
I would be able to tell you if they're going double my speed.
You could tell they're going faster than you.
Yeah, and he says an estimated 1,700 miles an hour. I don't know how the fuck he comes to that number, but anyway, we'll move on. And they're flying in a V formation, which, again, if you follow UFOs...
Ducks fly in V formation.
Ducks fly, so do the mighty ducks.
Exactly, flying V, baby.
Flying V. Look what Bombay did. A lot of UFO stories are V-shaped lights flying fast in the air, so... but this is what he sees, 1,700 mile an hour, 9 blue glowing objects flying in a V formation. So, of course, being the civilian that he is, he automatically jumps to, well, this has got to be new military tech, right? And again, this was 1947, so we're still talking about 2 years after World War II. What are you laughing for?
We're talking about 1947 for like an hour.
Well, this is important in UFO history.
This episode might as well be called 1947.
The year of the UFOs. But this is basically the first time, this is where flying saucer comes from, basically, because he describes the craft's motion as a saucer if you skip it across the water. So then the media sort of manipulates this as a flying saucer, right? It's in the air, it looks like a saucer, it's a flying saucer. So that's the media basically creates flying saucer off of Ken Arnold's story. Now, where this gets a little hinky is, and this is where my scientific knowledge sort of eludes me. There's something in the air that happens and the sunlight hit his plane at the right angle that basically everybody can line that up to say, like, this motherfucker was flying so high with his little Cessna that the angle of the sun hit this cloud just right or some shit that it ends up to be this natural weather phenomenon. So I think, to my knowledge, this one was sort of debunked.
There's lots of natural phenomena, weather phenomena like you described, optical illusions. There's lots of things that can happen that would make someone feel like, oh, there's something happening up there that I don't understand.
Yeah. I think the tricky thing, and this is where you and I agree, Adam, is once, like, when you're flying and you're, especially military aircraft that are going hundreds of miles an hour, and you're at 20,000 feet, you're at 30,000 feet, and you're cutting, you're going upside down, you're doing all these maneuvers, there's got to be some chemical in your brain that, like, just goes off and says, here's a fucking alien. Like, you're going to see something, like,
oh, that'll fuck with your head so bad, probably.
You get to a point in the atmosphere where the natural phenomenon takes over, and then if it's at night, it's a completely different ball game with different brightness of stars. You can't tell the depth of something. You can't tell how far something is away. So I think a lot of these sightings, a lot can be attributed to, as they say, Venus or Jupiter or a comet or a falling star or something like that.
Yeah. Have you heard of something called the motion after effect?
I have not heard of the motion after effect. What is the motion after effect?
The motion after effect was actually something first identified by Aristotle.
In his journal?
Probably in his journal. And it relates to the human imperfection related to eyesight. What he found was that, like, if you stared at something moving for a long time, like, say, a stream, which is what Aristotle talked about, but it applies to anything, really. Anything moving for a while, and then you shift your gaze to something not moving or static, it appears to move, usually in the opposite direction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it occurs because the neurons that detect motion in a certain direction will adapt after being stimulated for a period of time. But I mean, I think this is one of many possible explanations for what people sometimes see, and especially ones that we can't ever like identify, right? Because, oh, okay, I saw this thing, but it wasn't even real. It was an optical illusion. So, you're never going to be able to explain it because it never actually happened.
Yeah, but do you think that, let's say that happens, or that potentially it's a natural phenomenon or something. Do you think when 2, 3, 10, 50 people see the same thing, do you think that's like the group think mentality, or do you lend more credence to those sightings that have multiple people seeing it, or do you think it just becomes like that weak-minded, like, oh yeah, I saw that too? I
mean, I think, there's, in some of the scales that I saw around some of these sightings,
yeah.
I mean, obviously some of the official UFOlogy people are going to give more weight to the sightings that have multiple people, and the people that see it are credible people. Right, not just like some 12-year-old kid on the street, right? Like astrophysicist that saw this, right? That's like a credible witness versus Chase Ferris standing in his backyard. He's not credible.
What?
I'm sorry, he's not.
I probably know more about fucking UFOs than most of those fuckers do. So
yeah, but you want to believe.
Well, that's the other thing in a lot of this too, right? Is these pilots, probably Ken Anderson is one of those people that wants to see an alien, or that got caught up with the Battle of Los Angeles, and he wanted to be one of those people that saw something around Mount Rainier, and that definitely adds to your ability to process information and be able to make a sound judgment as to what something actually is. Let me ask you this. So you're obviously, I can tell it in your voice and by the look of your ugly face, that you're a skeptic, right?
I'm full on Scully.
So tell me why, I guess. Like this is one of those things, again, that is so embedded in the history of the world, not just the United States, not just Europe, and not just a certain time frame in the world. Like this goes back to hieroglyphics, where there's little jet-looking things in the hieroglyphics and stuff like that. So tell me why you are such a skeptic, I guess.
About what? UFOs?
About the existence of something that we can't necessarily, and I think I know why, is because you equate it to you equate UFOs to aliens, right?
So I don't think that UFOs are aliens. No, I think that what we are seeing as UFOs are either natural phenomena.
Okay.
They are optical illusions. They are things like weather balloons, planes, any sort of logical explanation, or it could be something that we don't yet understand as a people.
Like what?
I don't know. We don't understand it yet. Just like back in John Winthrop's days in 1639, he didn't understand everything about the universe that we understand today. So he could have seen, I don't know when we understood shit about shooting stars, but theoretically, at some point we didn't know about shooting stars. Right. So you see a shooting star and, oh shit, that could be an alien. Well, no, it's just a shooting star. It's a meteor.
Okay.
Right? And before you understand what a meteor is, you can't explain it. So that's the type of thing I'm explaining. I'm not saying that all of these things are meteors, but I'm saying that it's just something that we don't yet understand.
So you think we're alone?
No, that's not what I'm saying either. I think that it's naive to believe that there is not other living creatures on another planet. I think just the sheer math and probability would say that there is some other life form out there.
Yeah. But again, I'm in your camp with this, where I think you can be a believer in unidentified flying objects and still not believe in aliens. How much do you think is like tech that we don't know about versus how much do you think it's just weather phenomena?
I wouldn't be able to like weight the unexplained ones in either way, but I think those are two very logical explanations for unidentified flying objects. Is again just things that we don't yet understand, are not widely known. Like you're talking about potentially technology that's known only to a select few individuals.
All right, so let's peel back that onion a little bit. I'm just going to discount the weather phenomena because I really can't talk intelligently about unknown weather phenomena that we might not know yet. So let's say that there's an unknown tech out there somewhere that you can attribute to these recent ones, right? Like, I think even you would say that we have to assume that before X date, you can't blame it on tech, right? Like the sightings from 1639 is not blamed on, oh, somebody invented a fucking airplane back then, you know?
Well, no, not an airplane, but someone could have invented something more advanced than the common people knew about.
See, this is such a strange, because I feel like
people are always inventing shit.
I understand, but I don't know, man. It seems like we live in a world where this stuff doesn't stay hidden. And let's talk about currently, right? So do you feel like some of these sightings, you know, from the 40s, 50s on up, assuming they're from some sort of tech that we don't know about, do you think it's tech that comes from another world that somebody's developing? Because there's
why would I think that?
Well, because there's people out there, and I'm kind of obsessed with Bob Lazar. I don't know how much you know about Bob Lazar, but you know he worked at Area 51 or a subcomponent of Area 51 out there. He basically makes the rounds claiming, you know, since the 80s or early 90s when he worked there, that he worked on tech that was from another world, that we don't have the technology to be able to do what he was basically working on, the propeller or the propellant of this craft. And he claims, you know, during his time there that he saw 7 or 9 different aircrafts or different UFOs that we had captured or found that were all being tested on and stuff. He claims had walked through one. He can draw pictures of it and all this stuff. But so he claims that there's tech out there that people have that are from another world that are, you know, obviously we're trying to reverse engineer to be able to develop. And there's also people that claim, I think Tom DeLonge from Blink-182 is another good example where his company that got started up, he claims that he has, you know, metal or, you know, compounds from a spaceship or a craft of some sort that are not components of anything that we know about here.
But why does that have to be alien technology? Why wouldn't that be just as likely to be tech from the future?
Well,
some time traveler coming back and giving that to us. To me, that's just as plausible as an alien.
What? I don't understand how that's just as plausible as aliens. So
exactly, it's just as plausible.
No, it's not.
Completely crazy and random.
But it's not, though, because you said you'd be naive to think that we were the only people in the universe, right? So, or the only things in the universe. So
I agree.
But you wouldn't be naive to think that we can't fucking time travel.
So,
and some of this stuff that's being, you know, some of this stuff that's claiming to be out there are breaking the laws of physics or are utilizing compounds and, you know, chemistry that we hadn't discovered back in the 90s. And this, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but Bob Lazar said it's element 115, which wasn't on the periodic table, wasn't known to be able to be stabilized here on Earth. Nobody knew about it, basically. But this thing that Bob Lazar was working on in the late 90s utilized this as its main fuel source. And it come to find out years later, as Bob Lazar is proselytizing, element 115 or 151 on all of these shows and in books and stuff, then I think the Germans eventually, several years later, in the late 90s or early 2000s, actually were able to stabilize element 115 on Earth. But that's after Bob Lazar had already talked about this. He was the only person that knew about this that was claiming all of this. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, so what you're saying is...
So you're saying if I say something that we can't yet do technologically, but I think we should be able to do it, and then like 5 years down the road, the technology advances to the point that we can do it, I must have been able to see alien tech to just know that could happen?
No, I'm not saying that. But if you think...
That's what you're saying.
if you think about some of the tech that we're potentially talking about, right? Like referencing these current videos, a lot of these videos and going back, 90s, 2000s, there's no, stream of smoke or heat or anything coming off of these things, right? I mean, if they're taken by FLIR, you should be able to see that. Let's assume that these UFOs are utilizing a fuel source that you don't need to, have that plume of smoke or that chemtrail following you. That's basically technology that we don't fucking have yet. That's nuclear technology. That's, and I'm definitely not going into all of the details of like what it takes. I don't know all the details. This is me just playing side chair astrophysicist and mechanical engineer. But if you were developing this stuff, if you had this technology, you rule the world. So why, if there is a country, there is a person or company that's developing this tech and they're testing this stuff and they happen to get found, and if all the claims are the correct, where some of these crafts or some of these UFOs are bending the laws of physics, where they can move at at angles that shouldn't be possible, and one of these things was claimed to go 4 miles in 2 seconds. If you have that tech in today's current world, you rule the world. And that's what these people want, is to develop this tech so that they can have superiority. So why is this company or person or country not taking over the world?
Because it's not real, or it's an optical illusion.
So that's when you divert back to weather phenomena, right? I mean,
or optical illusion. There's some other logical explanation. So we can talk about the specific videos you're talking about, which are grainy.
Okay,
not clear videos, okay? And generally, I would say that we should abide by like a certain standard. So extraordinary claims like aliens or this extreme technology requires extraordinary evidence. Like you can't just make that kind of claim and not be able to overly support it. And I don't think these few grainy videos that we'll talk about here in a second really prove anything.
Okay.
Sure, they maybe leave some questions. But yeah, I mean, just generally, I think we should kind of have the standard that these really out there, outlandish, extraordinary claims really have a high burden of proof from an evidentiary standpoint.
So I should believe in ghosts because you think you saw a ghost.
Well, you're going back to a previous topic here.
That's the only piece of evidence that I have. A grainy vision of you waking up, So you can't tell me that I should believe in ghosts based off of that incident, and then also tell me that I can't believe in UFOs or aliens because the video is too grainy.
So one, we're talking about UFOs. We're not talking.
I'm just saying it.
Two,
this is what happens when you get your dick stuck in your hand. Is you're just like, don't circle back to the last episode.
I mean, we can really take this all the way back to JFK.
Two,
we're talking about video evidence.
Two, this is a fair point.
Yes,
that's true. This is a fair point. Three, I said if you go back and listen to ghosts, I shouldn't believe it, but I saw it, right? So I'm not saying that because I saw a ghost, everyone in the world should believe ghosts because that clearly proves that they are true. I'm saying that that's what I believe.
Right. But you believe it based off of one piece of evidence, that you saw a ghost. That
I saw
that
a ghost,
one
yes.
instance is everything else in the entire world of ghosts has never been provable. That you have one piece of evidence is that you have seen a ghost. I have watched a video that I know is not doctored of a UFO. It's literally the same thing.
I guess it is a UFO, yes, because it's an unidentified flying object.
Tell me what your checkboxes are. Tell me what would qualify as that standard for you to live by for the burden of proof.
I mean, one would be a little more resolution.
Yeah, but Adam, you have to realize
these fucking things are grainy as shit.
These are on fucking jets. This is the greatest. That video, that sensor,
it looks like shit.
That
man.
sensor that took that fucking video is worth more than my house. It's not fucking Steven Spielberg directing this. This is a jet that's flying at enormous amounts
fine,
of speed.
But what I'm saying is it looks like shit.
It's using the technology that's available to be able to at least give us some sort of sense as to what this was. And then the second burden of proof for all, I don't want to digress because I want to hear your burden of proof, but there are also all of these well-trained military folk that we have put our trust in to protect our country that also have this eyewitness account. So you're combining tech with people, and together, that is what the whole fucking world is built on right now, and I trust
Well, there's
that.
the one video of those. There's like three or four.
There's three main ones right now. Yeah.
Of these grainy black and white
They're
videos
not grainy. They're from a FLIR camera.
that are on Tom DeLonge's company's website.
That would, well, if you put it like that, that sounds fakakta. It's on.
What's my age again? Blink-182 guy started an alien website.
No.
He has these black and white videos on it that are grainy as fuck. And in one of them, you hear the pilots talking.
No.
And they talk about drones. They say it's a drone. It's a drone, bro. That's a drone. Fuck, that's a drone. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, you're paraphrasing to the point where your facts aren't even correct.
That's not true.
You can watch all three videos. So Tom DeLonge started a company that basically produces sci-fi novels, movies, but part of that is research into UFOs and aliens and that sort of stuff. And the company is called To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences or some shit.
That sounds like L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology.
Listen, it has hired some heavy hitters from, the DOD, from the science community. They're doing legitimate research. They claim to have these materials that are otherworldly materials that are not, based on chemicals or constructs that we have here. And they hired the guy that, I don't know, he's chief of operations or something, that ran that black program in the DOD back in 2013, I think, or 2014, when this all came out, that there was a program that was tracking UFOs and that sort of stuff. So they're doing legitimate work. I don't want to discount. Tom DeLonge started a website. He wrote some Blink-182 songs, started a website, and now he's an alien. I don't want people to think that. Look it up. It's actually legitimate. So they get these videos from the DOD and they release them, and they're official DOD. The chain of custody is on all of these videos. They're officially from the DOD. They're from our F-18s or F-5s or whatever the hell took these videos. And the pilots and the commanders of these squadrons and these planes are all, going around as well, talking about their stories as well.
So why would the government declassify these videos if they were aliens?
They're not, but that's where you're wrong. The government is not claiming that they're aliens. The government is claiming we don't know what the fuck they are. Here they are.
This is a moot point then. It's an unidentified, we can't explain it yet. It's just some technology that we don't know as a broad public.
Exactly,
yet,
but
if you're not saying it's alien.
But if you're talking about technology that defies our laws of physics, that these things are maneuvering in ways that cannot happen unless there's a vacuum around it, so they can manipulate the time and space around these to be able to make the maneuvers and go as quickly as they are. They're using nuclear, supposedly they're using nuclear, energy to power these things because there's no trails behind it for, fuel and burn off and that sort of stuff. So it's all stuff that is not only beyond our comprehension, but it's beyond the level of physics that we have an understanding for.
Okay, so if you don't think that this stuff is aliens, then what are you saying it is?
I think it's aliens.
Okay.
Well,
so when I say why I don't think it's aliens, then you say, well, I'm not saying it's aliens.
I think a lot of these are not aliens. I think these last few,
the black and white grainy ones, you think are aliens.
I think if you start to gather the data and say, okay, well, the video is one data point, an eyewitness that we trust with our nuclear secrets that we've given top secret clearance. He's the commander of the squadron. He's basically like the top, 5 at the fucking ship on the U.S. carrier. We're trusting him with all of these other secrets. Why wouldn't we trust him when he says, I don't know what the fuck this was. It was going at this speed. If he's freaked out and he's, if he has doubts as to what it was, I think we should all, who am I to say, no, you're fucking wrong. I don't believe you.
So do you think aliens exist?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think aliens are visiting us on Earth and we are seeing them as UFOs?
That's a weird way to ask a question. In my mind, I am of the state of mind that UFOs, in some cases...
I'm not asking you if you believe all UFOs are aliens. That's not what I'm asking. That aliens are visiting us and we are seeing them visiting us through some of these UFO sightings.
Yes.
So you don't think that if an alien life form, civilization, whatever, is advanced enough to develop interstellar travel of the type that would be required to travel that kind of distance, that they would not be able to keep themselves hidden from us stupid humans?
Next question. No, I mean, I think there's diminishing returns, I think, on all of this. I think they are smart enough to know that we are getting technologically advanced enough that, and radar is a great example. And I think these last videos are a great example where how many miles off the coast were these sightings, right? I don't even remember what it was, but it was 50 or plus miles off the coast of California. So you're talking about the middle of fucking nowhere that these things are happening. Maybe they aren't aware of our radar technology. Maybe they think that they're flying under the radar for some of this stuff. Again, I'm discounting Adam. I'm right there with you on 98% of UFO sightings. These last ones that just came out are intriguing to me for many reasons. But one of them is that we actually have the technology now to be able to catch up to these things, be able to, record them however bad you think it is. We're able to, utilize, we're able to find them. Our radar technology is phenomenal now. So
I think, like I said a couple times, my main kind of summary is that there's clearly things that people are seeing that we can't yet explain.
What would that be, though? Give an example as to what that would like.
I told you back in the beginning of the episode. At some point in the past, someone saw a meteor, but we didn't know what a meteor was, so you couldn't explain it. So you made up some explanation, and maybe it was aliens, maybe it was Jesus, who knows what, but you couldn't explain it. But now we know, hey, that's a meteor.
But just to be clear, let's say that, one of these Navy videos are real. You say that somebody on Earth could potentially create that technology, and it doesn't necessarily have to be otherworldly. That's what you're saying, basically.
I'm saying that it doesn't necessarily need to be technology. It could be technology. Maybe it's some deficiency in the technology that's recording the data. Maybe it's some sort of weather balloon. Maybe it's some sort of weather phenomena. I don't know. There's lots of different reasons for what it could be. But I'm not saying that it has to be otherworldly. We just don't understand what it is yet. So there's these unidentified objects. We don't understand what they are yet. But that doesn't mean that they're alien. However, it is naive to think that there aren't other life forms living on other planets. What do you think about UFOs, Chase?
I think we know by now. I mean, my belief that there are other things out there in the universe, and I think there's reasons to come and visit us if you do have the technology. I think all those things add up to, I'm a believer. I'm a psychopathic believer and a lunatic.
Thanks a lot for listening. Stranger Than Fiction was created by Chase Ferris, Allison Davila, and me, Adam Davila. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and telling your friends. If you'd like to help support our show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/STFtalk. For more information about the show, additional content, and to learn a little bit more about us, check out our website at stftalk.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We love hearing from you. If you have a topic in mind or would like to be a guest on our show, send us a message. Our email address is strange@stftalk.com.
You bet your ass that I'm going to troll the internet and try to find stories of things getting released from here on out and just rub it in Adam's face so hard.
Do it.
I can't wait.